At the end of the day, what you're building is an asset, and most insurance agents rely on the business as their retirement fund. The more you grow, the harder it is to continue to scale.
Agencies need to find every ounce of efficiency they can. Anything they can do to keep the producer on the streets, because the other piece of this is the best time to prospect, man. When the market's hard, everybody wants to talk to you.
Virtual assistant overseas can quote the same amount that a US-based account executive or CSR can, because it still takes the same amount of time. The benefit of technology like this is we can quote a well-rounded account with 5 different lines, with 5 different carriers, so 25 independent quotes in under 30 minutes.
Making more money is great, writing more accounts is great, but to your point, our most valuable commodity that we have is our time, and we can't replace it. So if we can get our time back, I think if we think through all the areas we can invest that, we're going to find we're building wealth more than just monetarily in our life, through better relationships with our family, our friends, and our communities.
And it could be as simple as you need to go into a handful of carriers every month and download documents, right? Because they don't automatically go into your AMS or CRM. How do you do that today? You literally assign someone a task and they spend hours of their valuable time logging in, downloading documents, and attaching it to the customer file. This technology is already doing that automatically. Having been on the receiving end of the same stupid customer survey every year, where you ask me every year for my vehicle license plate, even though it hasn't changed, how can we make that information gathering or information updating process easier, not only for you, but for the person at the end who has to answer the same 10 questions every single year?
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Power Producers Podcast, where we are refining and redefining the sales game. And today I have the man, Colby Tunick from Refocus AI, who I just realized has refocused and is now moving in to some new things in terms of what their product offerings do. And I'm actually pretty excited to bring it up to everybody today. So this is Colby's second time on the podcast, and he's also been gracious enough to be a sponsor of Producers in Paradise this year in Key West. So if you're going to be there, make sure you thank him for that when you're in Key West. But I know he's excited to come down and hang with everybody. And after hearing about the differences in what they're doing with the product now, I'm pumped to have him there, because I think it's going to be germane to a lot of the discussion that we have on the technology side during our open forums. So welcome back, man. Glad to see you again.
Yeah, thank you. Unfortunately, I'm not as good looking as I was a few years ago. So
the insurance industry has a way of doing that to us.
I know it's thinning
I'm only
my
27.
hair.
I'm only 27, Colby.
That's right. So it's your, what is that, sixth anniversary of your 21st birthday?
There you go. Exactly. When I turned 50, I told him, no, I'm 18 with 32 years of experience. So
yeah, my grandfather went to the DMV with white hair and he wanted salt and pepper on the driver's license, and that wasn't an option. So I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, I hear you. I used to get it cut out. Now I just don't even care. It doesn't matter. It is what it is. So listen, man, before we get into the thick of it, why don't you kind of give everybody an update on who you are and kind of what Refocus is doing at surface level, and then we'll get down to the nitty gritty, because I'm telling you right now, you're going to want to hear what this guy's doing. They're doing some pretty incredible stuff right now.
Yeah. I mean, we've definitely gone through a transition, and we've been around in the market since 2019. As you mentioned, this is our second time on the podcast, and I really appreciate you having us back. Ultimately, where we started was just trying to help people understand how much time they needed to spend servicing policies at renewal. Because what we find is that 80% of time in an agency goes towards servicing existing policies, not bringing in net new business. And I like to joke that that's the tyranny of insurance. We have to resell everything we've ever sold every year, with only a handful of exceptions, like builder's risk and surety and special event. What other industry has that complicated sales motion where the more you grow, the harder it is to continue to scale? And, to put some hard numbers around that, on average, we find that it takes an hour and a half of time to service a renewal. And the subsequent staff cost for that 60 or 90-day period is $135. So if you just have 1,000 policies, 1,000 accounts, give or take, you're spending over $100,000 a year, right? You're essentially spending 2 full-time account executives just to maintain your book, not to necessarily grow your business. And so looking ahead from where we started of just how much time should you be spending, the natural evolution of the company was, well, let's do the most time intensive part of that servicing, which is actually quoting those policies. So I like to say, kind of tongue in cheek, but we're trying to build the driverless car of insurance servicing. Agents shouldn't have to go into carrier portals. In our vision, agents shouldn't have to play around with raters who arguably sometimes do a bad job returning actionable rates. What we've developed is a technology that works like a virtual assistant. It logs into carrier portals and it can complete the quoting process, and the rates are bindable 9 out of 10 times, and it provides essentially the response back to you. So you can spend your time interfacing with customers, being a more, advisory relationship, and, really leaving the data entry in the age of the dinosaurs.
Yeah, I mean the thing is too, man, it's one thing to save 100 and some $1,000. It's another thing to be able to work 24 hours a day too, right? Because if you're taking this whole process and automating it to where you can go in and quote on people's behalf, I'm very happy to think about the fact I could walk in, to the office one morning and my digital virtual assistant, whatever. I mean, do you have a name for it?
Yeah, so we're currently working title, don't hold this against us, is IntelliAgent.
Okay.
Less a reflection on insurance agents and more like it's an independent artificial intelligence
Sure.
agent, but
Sure.
we're working with it.
Yeah, no. So, but I mean, think about that, man. If I'm an agent and we're going through the thick of it, my staff can literally spend their time having the human connection, knowing with full confidence that we're still going to get everything done we would need to have done in a 24-hour period, but I'm not having to pay somebody to work overnight to do that or whatever else. I mean, I can imagine that the work list of what needs to be done from a clerical or data entry standpoint, what I consider to be tasks that should always be delegated to the lowest level of competency or outsourced or automated. Now we're not wasting our time, or I shouldn't say wasting, but spending our time doing that during the time we could actually be talking to our clients and our prospects. Like that's a huge bulk of the work that agencies go through. And I mean, even if you were using a virtual professional to do this, you still have a limited number of hours a day that these people are going to be able to work. You still have a recurring cost that could, depending on how many you have, end up being a significant amount of money. So I think it's pretty cool, to be honest with you. I think it's an interesting switch because originally I remember the first time we had you on the podcast and you were trying to predict, who's going to leave you at renewal, and being transparent. My first question was, is this really a problem for people? Like for us, I don't, and the reason why it wasn't necessarily that I didn't think that the product had merit. It's that the lens that I look at the world through is the middle market agency that we are. And compared to what the average agency out there does, we just don't have a huge volume in terms of number of accounts, right? If we put between 2 and 3 dozen accounts on the books every year, we've added $1 million in revenue at that point based on the average account size. And so because we don't have so many, like if I were more of a main street personal line small commercial agency, it's pretty easy for me to eyeball it. You know what I mean? If your producers don't have a ton of relationships they have to manage or whatever else. Now, me looking at it and saying, where can I grow my agency? Because I do feel like to a certain degree, we're backwards from where a lot of other people are, meaning a lot of agencies start with personal lines and small commercial and migrate. I've only ever done middle market, and I need to backfill. I need that personal lines business. I need that small commercial business, because when you bring in a $50,000 commission account, it's awesome. When you lose one, it's not, especially because it makes up a bigger piece of your book. So we're always looking for ways that we can streamline the process of writing, some of that smaller stuff. And that's where you get caught up. I mean, look, number one, is an agency principal, I have to accept the fact that that is not as much of a relationship as it is a transaction. I have to get over that first. Okay, I'm over it. The next thing is how do we actually get the quotes to be able to present this in a way that we're not burning a ton of hours to go out? Because at the end of the day, I could spend so many man hours going to 10 markets to quote a small commercial policy that I can't even make any money on it in the first year because I've already burnt through the profit margin before we ever had the deal in house. And that doesn't even contemplate the fact that we may not bind, but 30% compared to what we're, being in the high 90s in the middle market. So I just think there's a lot of stuff that can be done there that makes it easier for agencies to write more business and, to your point, scale without breaking the bank. Probably number one, because it's always going to be more cost efficient if you use technology, but then also without burning your people out too. I mean, I think that's the thing when we talk with people about using VAs. One of the biggest issues that they run into is their staff is worried that it's going to replace them. But if you sat a staff down and you said, tell me the things you hate about your job, no holds barred, you're not going to get in trouble, I want open and honest feedback, and they list those things out, 90% of those are what you would hire a VA for. And I feel like even with tech, something like this, if you've got that person that does nothing but gripe and moan about, oh, I had to quote all of this stuff today, but then you said, well, guess what? We found this awesome tool that can actually do that for you so that you can focus on spending your time having the conversations, cross-selling, doing, the other things. That person's first reaction is going to be, what do you mean? You're going to replace me with a computer and then they're not going to have a job? That's not the case. Our industry will always require some level of human connection. The reality is we need to use the tech to leverage our time so that we can have as much time with the one-on-one as possible, because that's where the business really gets done.
Yeah. And if there's anything that the last 5 years have taught us, it's that trying to sell on cost is not a sustainable strategy, regardless of what you're selling, small commercial, middle market, personal lines, because as soon as someone can offer a lower cost, you're gonna churn that account. So how do we get out of that? I can get to a lower cost policy. Well, it starts by having more time to actually spend building relationships and getting out there in the community. Because at the end of the day, our greatest commodity is time, right? Everyone has the same 24 hours in the day. So why are some agents much more effective with that 24 hours than others? Because we all need to sleep. We all need to spend time with our families. We all, hopefully are able to take the weekends off and recharge. It's because they understand that laying the foundation of becoming more of a risk advisor, trusted consultant is much better than, let me just quote as much as possible and build up my book on cost alone. And so, long term, what we see this doing is essentially, augmenting the humans who are the subject matter experts. When we think about the work that we've seen offshored recently with virtual assistants, most of it is this work. It's downloading policy docs and uploading them to the AMS. It's going into carrier portals. Ironically, though, there's still the same level of efficiency, right? A virtual assistant overseas can quote the same amount that a US-based account executive or CSR can, because it still takes the same amount of time. The benefit of technology like this is we can quote a well-rounded account with 5 different lines, with 5 different carriers, so 25 independent quotes in under 30 minutes. Because we can do that work with technology concurrently, rather than having to do it, one after the other. So what does that do? It makes what we've done as an industry, which is building relationships, that much easier and that much more sustainable, and something we're really proud of. And the feedback from the people using it has been phenomenal.
That's awesome. So I'm trying to think of, I had a thought and then it left me as quick as it came, which is not uncommon. What led you to make the transition? I mean, you're sitting there looking at the legacy Refocus product. Like what was the light bulb moment for you?
Yeah, well, the light bulb moment for us was we actually lost a large account. And we lost a large account because it wasn't anything that the technology wasn't doing. It was that this was a carrier or this was an agency in the American Northwest. And they had 25 markets, primarily personal lines. And every single market based on where they are in the US, was declining their policies. They couldn't write policies. They were actually sending them to a captive because that captive was the only one who was writing in that region. So it didn't matter that they were able to predict who was going to cancel, because even when they did, they were still spending their entire day quoting with every single market trying to save their accounts. And I know that's kind of an edge case, right? Hopefully you're not in a geographic part of the US where every admitted market and even E&S doesn't want your business and you have to give it to a captive. But that was the truth for this customer. And the one thing they said with us, that they said to me that stuck with me, was like, our biggest problem right now is we're just spending all of our time quoting and we're not getting anywhere. And so that really was kind of a foundational turn, because we had heard that from other customers too. You know, especially in a market that's hard, we have to go out to extra markets to find competitive rates with good coverage and minimal exclusions. How can we get ahead of that? So ultimately, what we chose to do as a result was focus on carriers that you could quote and bind online, which is a ton of small commercial, middle market commercial, and obviously personal lines. And where we're going by the end of the year is also being able to quote your more traditional E&S, where there's an underwriter involved and paper forms. So by the end of the year, we're working towards being able to quote 90% of the policies that are sold today automatically, and ultimately replace raters and the need to log into carrier portals as an agent to try and get bindable rates.
So I'll tell you, man, it's interesting too, because I think that you will be able to get into the E&S space pretty quickly. Because I mean, RT has the connector already. They've got a portal to quote. You know, I've never used PathPoint, but my understanding is that they have an online process that I would think is probably mirrors a lot of what the things are you're already integrated with and working with. So that's exciting to hear. I think, you know, right now, what I hear more than anything else, and this is why I think your product is such a great idea, is everybody, like you said, it's the hard market. It used to be that if you were to come into my office and tell me you're an HVAC company and you have 5 or 6 vehicles and you had a clean loss runs for the last 3 to 5 years, I'm literally going to go to my number one carrier because I know they love that business, quote it, and they would never be able to be touched. I wouldn't have to even quote a second carrier to validate, because it's just, that's how it was. It's not that way anymore. We have to go to every single carrier that we have. And here's where I have an issue with that, is a lot of the times now it's falling on the producer to go in and have to quote, because you've got the account managers that are tied up doing other things. And, you know, if they're having to quote their renewals in their new business, they don't have time to go out and prospect. Well, guess what? That might be good for the hard market for them to be that busy. But the reality is, when the market turns, if you haven't been out continuing to nurture and build your pipeline, you don't have anything to fall back on. And so anything that an agency can find right now, and let's call it what it is, man. I think the market's hard for the foreseeable future. It's going to soften in certain areas, but I mean, we're still a couple years removed, I think, from, you know, making any kind of real progress there. Agencies need to find every ounce of efficiency they can. Anything they can do to keep the producer on the streets, because the other piece of this is the best time to prospect, man. When the market's hard, everybody wants to talk to you. So that's where we need to be. But if we have to be in the office doing these other things because we don't have the tech, or we don't have, or even understaffed for the most part, that's the other piece. This takes a lot of the staffing burden off of the agencies too, because right now you're competing. COVID changed the game, right? You're competing with staff. I'm not competing with here. It's a big city, so it's kind of a little bit different. But if I'm in Columbus, Ohio, I'm not competing with other agencies in Columbus. I'm competing with agencies in New York and Chicago that are okay with an account manager working remote that can afford to pay them a lot more money than what I can. So they get to work remote. They make more money. The agencies in the big cities pay less than what they would have to pay for the same talent to live there. And it's creating a real problem. And I think that this is another way that you can help solve some of that, right?
I mean, at the end of the day, the value that the indie channel provides, as I know Jason Cass is fond of saying, is the advisorship, right? It's the risk management, it's the geographic specific consulting or industry specific consulting, right? Like I personally would not be able to advise an HVAC company with 6 vehicles in clean loss run on how they should be able to maintain that record. Like, how do I don't know how to help them set up a risk management program. I bet you do. And I bet most of the agents listening to this call do as well. So if that's the value you provide, how do we get you out in the street doing that more? Because at the end of the day, everyone's taking rate. You're going to have to give bad news at renewal, or thank goodness you got a renewal and you didn't get carrier canceled. So when that comes, what's determining the people that are sticky and the people that aren't is, have I provided value to you over the previous 12 months or 6 months of your policy cycle? Or am I just the person that sends you a bill? And if you're a person that just sends a bill, it's a difficult time to be in business. So how can we right that ship, change that dynamic, do what got everybody, or do what primarily drove us into the insurance industry, which was our love of people and the love of helping. That's what we're passionate about here. I like to say that at Refocus, like, we're trying to build great relationships. Like, that's our mission. That's our why. Just like we have great relationships with our family and our friends and our business colleagues, how can we help our customers, our insurance agents and brokers around the US and around the world now continue to build greater relationships with their insureds? I mean, that's what it's about. And that's how we win as an industry.
I agree completely. So what do you think you see on the horizon? I mean, I know you're talking, I mean, that's the iteration that you have right now, and you've got your roadmap. I mean, are you thinking about trying to solve any other issues inside the umbrella? And I'm not asking you to give me all the secret sauce either, but I mean, do you think you're going to stop here and make sure that this is the answer to the problem that we all face, or you have other things you're already poking and prodding around in?
Yeah, so we have two sort of innovations that are coming up really quick. One is that we know it's a pain point updating the information you have on an account. And we know insureds are busy. We work the same hours that they do, and trying to get them on the phone, regardless of what line of business it is complex. So how can we make that researching process easier, whether that's looking at aerial imagery, whether that's checking employee headcount, revenue, workers' comp loss runs, whatever it is. So the next module we're coming out with, and expecting that to launch in end of July, beginning of April, is what we're calling Know Your Customer. So essentially all of that pre-renewal or pre-servicing, updating the account, updating the AMS information, because that's the other component of this that takes a ton of time. And having been on the receiving end of the same stupid customer survey every year, where you ask me every year for my vehicle license plate, even though it hasn't changed, how can we make that information gathering or information updating process easier, not only for you, but for the person at the end who has to answer the same 10 questions every single year? The second thing that we're really excited about is we're coming out with an MGA marketplace. So this market, MGAs provide valuable coverage. We're seeing a ton of exclusions across all lines of business. And so the issue has historically been, there are coverages available, secondary coverages, to cover those exclusions, but the commission on those secondary policies is normally so low, it just doesn't make monetary sense for the agent to go and quote it. I mean, talk about wind hail exclusions, right? I mean, there are tons of policies that can cover those named exclusions, but you're talking only a handful of dollars in commission. So oftentimes we're not able to sell it because it's just not profitable for us to do it, to go in and quote those secondary coverages on an MGA specific portal. With the MGA marketplace we're coming out with, we'll be able to provide coverages for all named exclusions, as well as standalone policies for things like motorsports, flood, earthquake, that may provide better coverage over if it were just bundled into the main policy, not only for personal lines, but commercial as well. And so that'll be launching here sometime in August. So essentially you can provide the best bundle to your customer across all of the carriers you hold appointments with every time, without having to spend the human effort of going into 5 different portals to cover all of those named exclusions. So that's something we're also really passionate about. And this is actually the first place we're publicly talking about it. So you heard it here first, folks.
Ha! Well, that's because nobody else wants to ask the questions, right? So, I mean, let me ask you this. So, understanding as best I can remember of the original iteration of
Mhm.
Refocus, you were basically integrated with the agency management system, figuring out and putting a probability on who's the most likely to leave you at renewal.
Mhm.
I got to believe that there's also a way for you to use that same general technology and be able to look for cross sell opportunities or the ways people can round accounts or whatever else in addition to just going in. I mean, so I don't know if it's as seamless as setting this thing to run and then going in and, maybe, or even, I don't know, man. Now you got my wheels really spinning. Like, Progressive, for example, will give you a list of requotes to do that you
Sure.
had quoted the year before. I mean, how awesome would it be to take that list of those people and upload it to something and automatically have the system go out to the marketplace for you and quote all of those things that you might not take the time. Like, because I'll be honest with you, I don't pull that list every month. You know what I mean? We don't pull it and requote it because it takes time and effort to do that. But if there was a way to have technology do that for me, you never miss that again. You know what I mean? And then
Absolutely.
it gives you a good call list the next day, or accounts that maybe you swung at and missed, or even taking your existing book of business if you have the underwriting information because you've had these accounts for a while and setting it up to automatically go get you a flood quote for every single renewal, or make sure that an umbrella is quoted for every single renewal so that you're covering your rear end and making sure you're offering it, but you're also having the opportunity to incrementally increase your sales because you're not having to take man hours that are limited to do it because the technology can literally work for you 24/7, 365.
Yeah, and that is absolutely the ultimate goal, where you come in Monday morning and you have a list of people that have already been requoted for X, Y, or Z reason. Maybe we detected that they were likely to cancel, therefore a requote would have been necessary anyway. Maybe it's people from your carrier remarket list that you swung and missed with, and here's another chance at bat. And now you have actionable phone calls to make. You have a reason to ask these people for a few minutes of their time. I mean, another like something I like to talk about is, at least in the personal world, right? Like people have a lot of toys. You're in Florida, right? Whether that's boat or motorcycle or just general motorsports, a lot of those secondary policies just don't make raters, right? So how can you continue to win that business? How might you be able to offer a more lucrative, higher commission, but better value policy to your insureds that's not, say, bundled in with the quote you got from Dairyland or Progressive, right? Because at the end of the day, there's a reason those MGAs are in business, and it's often because they offer a superior product over what would be bundled in with the main policy, whether that's your work comp GL on the commercial side or your home and auto on the personal side. So again, it's really about letting our our customers and our insureds get the best of both worlds and reducing the clicks just to get that done. So yeah, we're super excited, and we're iterating really fast. So if you dream of it, it probably will be in production in the next 2 to 3 months.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think there's just endless opportunities, man. I'm thinking through all the places where we're not as efficient as we need to be, and because of that we don't get the crumbs is what I would call it, but guess what, the crumbs add up if you have enough of them, and I'm afraid we have more than what I'd care to admit in the agency, and I think I'm not alone in that. You know what I mean? I think there's a lot of people out there that are dealing with the exact same thing right now.
And it could be as simple as you need to go into a handful of carriers every month and download documents, right? Because they don't automatically go into your AMS or CRM. How do you do that today? You literally assign someone a task and they spend hours of their valuable time logging in, downloading documents, and attaching it to the customer file. This technology is already doing that automatically, right? How can you make the best informed decision for your agency? Well, you need to have all the information at hand. And right now, it's super time consuming to do that and get it all into one place, especially if you're on ENS, nothing downloads, right? It's hard to do. It's hard to do it well. So it goes beyond just simply like, how do you get a quote from a carrier? It's also, how do you get all the information you need to provide the best advice, regardless of the system that you're using. And so from that to actual, timely upsell, cross-sell opportunities, to uncovering and automating remarkets for people that needed your help anyway, finding new opportunities, someone who bought a second home and hasn't communicated that to you. Those are the next set of challenges we're already working on, in addition to what we talked about.
What have we missed, man?
I think at the end of the day, right, kind of tongue in cheek, we like to say we're building the driverless car of insurance servicing, because the value that, again, agents and brokers provide their communities is not the button clicks, it's the advice, it's how to make sure your family and friends are protected when the unthinkable happens. And so a driverless car model, if you will, is an amazing fit. And to be fair, it's something that's been overdue for a long time. We've tried to band-aid fixes together with raters. We've tried to band-aid things through either buying RPA tools or building it ourselves. But at the end of the day, that's not our job. It shouldn't be our job. It shouldn't be our job to figure out and solve the technological challenges. Not everyone can go and build their own AMS in HubSpot, right? I mean, I hate to say it, a genius move, but also an act of desperation, part of the larger players that aren't building fit for purpose tools. So, we think we'll be at that driverless car future here for insurance servicing by the end of the year.
That's awesome, man. People don't hold him to it. We know how technology works, but if he's got the guts to say it, he's believing it's going to happen. So I'm excited, man. I think there's a lot of stuff that you're going to be able to solve, and it's like everything else. It's spider webs, man. You have one idea and then you have 10, and then you have 10 off of each one of those prongs too. At least if your mind works the way that mine does. My ADHD carries me not down a rabbit hole, but every rabbit hole, and sometimes simultaneously. But I'm pumped, and transparently excited to get the tech into our agency. I mean, we've dealt with, from a rater standpoint, the same company since we opened. Why? Because somebody in a Facebook group recommended them. I can't tell you that it's the best product on the market. I mean, I guess it meets needs to some degree, but I'm very, very interested in what this thing will do for us with our carriers for the small commercial quoting, as well as the personal line stuff, because I feel like we're leaving a lot of money on the table by not writing as much as we could in those areas, for all the reasons I mentioned. We just don't make as much money per account, so we're not going to spend the time there. But if we can write that and not have to spend the same amount of time, I'll take that 10 out of 10 times.
And that's what we're hearing. We've been fortunate now to work with multiple top 100 brokers, some of the largest independent agencies in the US. And we're also working, quite frankly, with owner operators. It's one person in an agency with 300 accounts, and they're overwhelmed, right? So we know that this is an issue across the board. And I'm tired of going to conferences and hearing people talk about it. And, we're still at the end of the day are copying and pasting the same 20 bits of information into 10 different carriers. So it's about time.
Yeah, no, I agree, man. I agree with you. The other thing too is, it's not in. I know that this might be a stretch for some of you out there. I promise you it's not, but you're also freeing up people's time to do the other things that are important. Okay. We've talked about getting more business. We've talked about being able to quote easier and everything else, but let's talk about the other stuff. You won't miss the little league game because you have to stick around and quote the account. You don't have to miss investing in that community activity and being visible where you're at. You can actually pour into your communities more. And I think that, part of what we need to be thinking about, just in the grand scheme of everything, is when we have more time, what do we do with it, right? We don't want to be the lottery winner that doesn't know how to manage money and ends up being bankrupt in less than 5 years after hitting the jackpot. This is really a time to sit down and reflect and think about, what are the things that are the most important to me? Is it spending more time with my kids? Is it traveling with my wife? Is it, being able to go and be at the fourth, Christmas parade that's at noon on Tuesday to hand out water bottles, which I realize not everybody in the country has to do that at Christmas time, but we do in Tampa. So, but I mean, all of that stuff, man. And I look at it from that perspective too. Making more money is great. Writing more accounts is great. But to your point, our most valuable commodity that we have is our time, and we can't replace it. So if we can get our time back, I think if we think through all the areas we can invest that, we're going to find we're building wealth more than just monetarily in our life through better relationships with our family, our friends, and our communities.
Yeah, I had a personal gut check a few years ago when I saw a statistic that we spend 30% of our life sleeping, right? I mean, 24 hours in a day, you spend 8 hours of that sleeping on average. And in and of itself, that doesn't necessarily mean anything. But if you live to 90 years old, you've spent 30 years of your life asleep. So you better have a good mattress, is the takeaway. Plug for mattress companies. But secondarily, once you take care of everything else, eating, personal care, working out, you're left with 30 years, 40 years of your existence to actually do to do things that are pleasurable, right? Because the other 30 years of your life is probably going to spend in the office. So that's all the time we get on this world. We 2/3 of our life, 60 years of our 90 years, if we're lucky, we are spending asleep or in the office. And so do we either try and spend less time in the office, right? Or do we try and maximize the limited hour, those 30 years, those limited years we get to do things that are fun? And that was a gut check for me, because that was the first time I realized that my whole life was work and I'm actually missing out on life.
Listen, man, I am a big fan. I keep saying it, but not only can you spend less time in the office, but you can actually work while you're sleeping. Like, that's how you spend less time in the office if you're leveraging tech like this.
Yeah, it's a seemingly simple problem to an age-old quest of how do we get more enjoyment out of life? Ultimately, I find enjoyment out of this. I find enjoyment, having a conversation with you, David. I get enjoyment out of talking with our customers. What I don't find enjoyment for is copying data out of LinkedIn into our CRM. And I spend a fair bit of time doing that, right? And I imagine most people listening to this call would feel the same way. And that's fundamentally no different than how we spend time servicing policies, right? So, or if we're fortunate enough to have staff, that's what we are having them spend 30 years of their life on, which is that same copy paste. So even if it's not a problem for us, how can we improve our staff retention? It's by having them do higher, more meaningful jobs in the agency, connecting with people in the community, building relationships, finding personal fulfillment, getting that extra insurance designation that'll let them stand out in the markets they operate in. Those are meaningful, enriching activities. Like I said, it just, at the end of the day, comes down to relationships. The one with yourself also matters.
Yeah, no, that 100%. You said something before, and I think that it's going to be interesting to track this, but as more and more tech evolves that makes it easier to quote and service, I think you're going to see a larger number of one-person shops show up, or maybe, one person with one account manager or CSR, because you're enabling them to do that. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see how all of this goes down with agencies too, because you're at a point where if you've got a really good producer and that producer's entrepreneurial, they may decide there's a better opportunity for them to go do their own thing, make more money, and tech's enabling them to do that. So why wouldn't they take that risk at that point?
Yeah, the ultimate metric I wish more people in the industry talked about is average revenue per employee.
Yep.
Right. And there's a ton of metrics, right? I mean, you go into your AMS, you go to the dashboard, and most of them, honestly, day to day are meaningless. Maybe there's North Star metrics. At the end of the day, what you're building is an asset, and most insurance agents rely on the business as their retirement fund.
Yep.
We've heard that, right? Perpetuation planning right now, succession planning is a huge topic. So what's going to determine that at the end of the day over any other metric is revenue per employee. How do you do that? by reducing the amount of admin level work, you know, lowest qualified person to do the work, that those sort of tasks.
Yeah, 100%, man. And I think, I mean, look, I look back at what it was like when I launched Florida Risk by myself in the dining room of my home 10 years ago. We were nowhere near the technology we have now, but I invested in tech first because that allowed me to get to my first 500,000 in revenue without hiring anybody. So, I mean, I get it. I've lived the one-man shop life before and leveraged what limited tech we had to be able to free me up to be able to go out and produce. With things at the level they are now, I can't even imagine what it would be like, because I may never have hired a person. I might have just stayed a one-man shop, to be honest with you. I think there's a lot of merit in that. You know, we're in an industry where if your work-life balance is what's most important to you, that's fine. You can make great money and still have a great life. You know, I don't think we need to all subscribe to this culture of you have to grind it out every single day for 18 hours a day, and you have to be in pain in order to be, you know, making forward progress or success. No, you don't. I'm sorry. I just don't agree with that. I feel like when you start something, you have to work harder to get it off the ground, but you don't need to get caught in that death trap, because what happens is you work so hard to build your agency from the ground up that you wake up 15 years later and you're still working every bit as hard as you were before, and you're on your, you know, you've been divorced for the second time, your kids are grown and gone, and you've made a bunch of money, but what do you have to show for it? You know, and that's my biggest concern for people in this industry more than anything else, is you've got this subset of people out there that just feel like you need to punish yourself in order to be considered successful. No, you don't. You just need to go in and execute on the basic things and do as good a job as you can. And we are in an industry where you'll be rewarded financially for making the right decisions. And we're thankfully in one where if you make a bad decision on most things, it's relatively gracious there too. It's not going to put you out of business in most cases. You can course correct, fix it, and move on. But I'm pumped, man. I think you're going to, you know, whether you realize it or not, if this thing does what it's going to do, and I have every amount of confidence that you're going to pull it off, you're going to give a lot of people an opportunity they wouldn't have otherwise had to go out and hang their own shingle or change their own family tree. And, you know, that's a pretty cool position to be in if you sit back and allow yourself to look at it, not because you need to pat yourself on the back for it, but to be able to say, you know what, I created something that changed people's lives for the better. And regardless of how much money's nice, don't get me wrong, I like money and prefer to have lots of it if possible, but I also feel far more rewarded helping other people change what the course of their life was, because money can't buy that emotional feeling that you get when you do that. And I'm always going to be more motivated by knowing I have the ability to change people for the better than the fact that I could just go out and make more money for myself. And, you know, I realize not everybody's wired that way, but that's how I'm wired.
And you know, it's funny when you take different sales assessments, right? That the salespeople that ultimately rise to the top are the people who don't necessarily care about being liked, but respected. And they feel that way because they know that they are doing what they're doing from a position of helping others, right? And oftentimes when you're respected, you are also liked. They are certainly not mutually exclusive. I like to think that one of the reasons we've been around since 2019 is because people like and respect us, and I think that delivers. That speaks to our ability to actually deliver on some of these promises. You're not around for almost 6 years because you don't deliver.
Not in this environment, you're not.
No.
That's for sure.
Yeah, I actually, a lot of people don't know this. I put myself in the hospital end of last year, working crazy hours with a neuropathy. I ended up with a pinched nerve that was completely debilitating. I was told I was going to die. Because at the time the doctors thought it was a neurological.
You probably felt like it at least, right?
Well, you know that what that taught me though is that I built a business that I could take myself out of and it could still run. Because I talked to a lot of insurance agents that can't, like, you know, they're finally in the Bahamas on a vacation with their family and they're still on their phone every single minute while they're not they're there, they're not present. And it's because they built their agency in a way that requires them to run. And I like to think that, where technology really shines is letting people take themselves out of the business so that they can get that, like they can experience the benefit of all their hard work. And how do you do that as a small business owner in the United States? It's really hard. I mean, again, I worked myself into a hospital bed doing that. It was not fun. Multiple CT scans and MRIs later. So, how do you and I actually was going through that when I saw you at ITC in October last year. It was just sort of hush hush under the table.
I was running the numbers to figure out if that was the case.
Yeah, I was in the hospital a week before ITC. So, and I got myself out of the hospital, go to ITC, and then I think I worked myself back into the hospital. But like, none of the take that out of it, right? Like, I am a great example of what a lot of agents in the US are going through with burnout, or approaching burnout, causing medical conditions that might be unnecessary. Like, you only have one life, right? Time is the most valuable commodity. If you can't learn to automate the tasks that don't actually require you, you will never be able to achieve the ability to enjoy your success, because you're always going to be required to make the wheels turn.
Yep, 100%.
Yeah,
it's a wrap, man. I think we've given them everything that we possibly can to tease them and make them think at the same time. Maybe even question life philosophy a little bit. Who knows? But again, great conversation. We need to, what I would like for you to do, and I'll record this and share it, but I want you to get in, when you and Grayson talk about the other project you're working on. By the way, Producers in Paradise, you're in for a massive treat and a surprise, and I'm not going to tell you what it is, but Colby's part of it, and it's really cool. But when you talk to him about that, if you can, set up a time with him to let him demo what you're doing, and if I'm able to be part of it, which I will move my calendar to be part of it so I can see it, but I'd like to get that in process sooner than later.
Yeah, we'll love to show you it. We're really proud of what we've built, and so like I said, we have it in the hands of people that are using it, and it's been phenomenal.
Awesome. Well, listen, man, again, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for your support of our community. I know that everybody will be super pumped when they hear what you're doing as well. So look forward to spending time with you down in Key West, and we'll talk soon.
Excited to be there. See you soon.